And we're live. Hi, welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Business Forum. I'm Presley Reeder. Thrilled to have you. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Nancy Barto, and we are going to have a great conversation today with Nancy. Before I get into that conversation, I just want to remind you, if you haven't tuned in to the Phoenix Business Forum before, it's been the financial forum for over a decade. It was started by Mel Schultz, a local businessman, and hosted here at Living Streams Church, which is where we are today, for over a decade. And now we are kind of reinventing it a little bit as the Phoenix Business Forum. We did our first show a month ago with a local economist, Stephen Slavinsky, and if you haven't checked that out, you can go and listen to that. It's on YouTube and all those places. And today we're going to talk with Nancy Barto, and I'll introduce Nancy. As I said, I want to thank our live studio audience today, though, for coming. I don't know if there they are. There they are. There's a few folks who have joined us by invitation. We're really glad to have them. You know, part of the forum is getting people back in person so we can network and continue to have these great conversations, both live streamed and in person. So we were glad to have a few folks join us today, and hope they enjoy the conversation as much as I plan to, and hopefully you do as well. As I said, Nancy's with us, and I cannot tell you how privileged I am to be sitting with Nancy Barto and having this conversation. Nancy, you're a leader in our community, and you are a very kind person. I have gotten to know you a little bit. You have a kind husband, Joe. You have kind children. You have kind grandchildren, whom I know too. And I think, you know, when you sit down with somebody like this and all of your professional accomplishments, I thought about, what do I say first about you? And I thought, I need to tell people that she's kind. And so I'm glad to be able to say that up front. Now, I do have to say, you know, why we have you on besides your kindness, and that is that you're Arizona State Representative for Legislative District 15. You're also soon to be Senator for that district, and congratulations, you're running unopposed in the November election. And you have a long history of serving our state in that respect, so we're grateful for your service and excited to talk with you today. Thanks for coming on. Busy election season that you made the time to come on with us too.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and with all of you. I really appreciate it, and maybe you're going to have to get to know me a little bit better to make sure that, you know, I'm a normal person. Kindness does not always run through my veins, but
fair enough.
Hopefully it does most of the time.
Kind and driven and passionate, and I think we're going to see some of that today. But so let me start, Nancy, our conversation by asking you about that kindness. You know, I don't think that's a word that we think of a lot in politics these days. And so when I thought of how kind you are and the generations of kindness that you have led, I wonder, why would you get into politics at all? And how does somebody so kind survive in that kind of an environment? Can you just give us a little background on that?
You don't have to be nasty to be in politics. You don't.
News to me.
Absolutely not. But frankly, I never wanted to do this job. And so I always say it really happened by accident, and through that I'm sure that God had a plan for me to do this, but it certainly wasn't my plan. In fact, you know, I'm a really shy person naturally, and it's just been a huge stretch and an opportunity to grow in so many different respects doing this. But how I got involved was Joe and I both came from very political backgrounds, homes. Our parents always talked about political things, but we really weren't very involved until we had our 3 children, and we started paying more attention. We happened to go to a church where there was a special guest. Her name was Kathy Herod. Some of you are familiar with her work with the Center for Arizona Policy, and she was a member of that church and was the state director for the Concerned Women for America at the time, for Arizona, and she was informing the church body about what was happening in our state in terms of family issues. And it piqued my interest, especially having 3 girls in public schools and understanding that our parental rights were really at risk because things were happening and there were no laws against Planned Parenthood coming into a public school and actually taking a student across state lines, a 13-year-old, this actually happened, for an abortion, and her parent never even knowing that. There were no parental consent or notification laws about abortion. And so that really piqued our interest because we had thought about those types of things. And so we started watching more closely. And from there, we got involved in a campaign, which led from one thing to another, us getting involved in our district meetings, committees, becoming precinct committee people. I was asked to serve as a district chairman in my committee, and that in itself was a pretty huge step. But then when there was a vacancy in office, one of the legislators in our district was removed from office. I was appointed to take his place. And that was a huge opportunity. It wasn't something I even strived to do at that point, but again, God opened doors that I didn't see opening at all, and it's just been an incredible blessing to be able to serve the people and to be returned year after year, because I think the values that I represent there are very, they are the principles of the Republican Party, principles of freedom and our family values.
That's a great story. As you said, you felt the call of the Lord to move into it. You volunteered in a way. I wanted to ask you a little bit about local politics and how people can get involved. I guess we need to warn them that if you do, you could end up as a state senator, which would be a great thing. So don't let that keep you from getting involved. I was talking to my wife about getting the opportunity to speak with you, and she said, well, ask her about local politics and why it's important and how we could get involved, because we all know about the presidential race. We all think, I think, about those things that we see on TV a lot, which are not necessarily about our neighborhood, but you deal with our neighborhood a lot. And so maybe speak to people real quickly about why it's important to know what's going on and how they could get involved.
Yeah. Well, it's more important than ever at every level of government. I think a lot of people do come off the sidelines more in a presidential year. They're more tuned in to federal policies and you know, the media hype surrounding all of that. The issues are often the same at the state level, but just they hit you at home more directly at the state level. And so I think it's incredibly important for people to tune in to all levels of government and get involved. Many don't understand that, even though they understand the U.S. Senate is really at risk of being flipped. Our state legislature is also on the bubble. We only hold a 1-seat majority in the state Senate and a 2-seat majority in the House. So, and many of those, every one of those seats is up for election. And so they've sort of taken for granted that all of the policies that we've been able to pass year after year for the last decade or two that protect our freedoms, that promote school choice, and all the other things that help make us a prosperous state could be repealed and could be turned back in a very, very short time if we don't hold our majority. So getting involved is critical. I think one of the best ways to do that is to call your elected representative and ask to get involved and find out where they are on the issues. And if they're up for election and you like them, get involved in their campaign. I think that's a great way. Also, get involved as a precinct committee person. Yeah, you might end up running for office, but that might not be the worst thing to do. Or you might end up running for some other lesser office like city council or school board, all of those need the Christian voice. They need the voice of the people. You know, government is, our nation is built upon citizen representation. Every type of citizen needs to be represented for it to be a really healthy place for us to live and prosper. That's how our founders set it up. And you know, it takes all of us to join in and have our voices heard. There are moms like me. I wasn't a political nerd in terms of having a degree in political science or anything like that. But my voice as a mom is important. And so is the voice of all different kinds of business. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, they all have a voice that's important. So being a precinct committeeman is actually the lowest form of an elected position. You actually have to run for it, and then you can vote from there in all of the important positions in the party that you are elected to at every level, from the district you're in, and there are 30, one for every legislative district, and then the county party, you get to vote for leadership there, and the state party leadership. So you have a voice. And a lot of people think, well, I just don't have time. Well, when I was a district chairman, I would tell people, I don't have time either. I'm busy. I've got 3 kids in school. But I'm giving all the time I can to do this. And you can give a little bit of time too, because if we opt out, somebody else's voice is going to vote on the type of leader you have in your party. Whether you have a pro-life, pro-family platform is at risk every time that platform is discussed at the national, at the state, at the district, at the county level. And so what do you care about? Are your values being represented by your party? That all happens at the grassroots level by the precinct committeemen.
Yeah. I was thinking about my kids as you were talking, and when they complain about the way the dishes get cleaned or not cleaned in the dishwasher, or when they complain about a task around the house, my first response is usually, well, you can go ahead and do that. That would be great. Is that you volunteering to help mow the yard because the grass is too long and you can't play in the backyard right now? Or and it, to me, that relates to this idea that there's a lot of complaining that goes on about the policies that are implemented, about the platform that's being discussed, and maybe that complaining's happening on social media, maybe it's happening on the couch in your living room, but the challenge that I hear from you is you got to get off that couch and do something. At the very least, you got to get out and vote. And then beyond that, there are some fairly small commitments you could make that make a big difference if you really want to have your voice heard. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that message. I'm trying to pass that on to the next generation as best I can. They're not always following it, but I'm trying.
We kind of assume that, you know, people that government just sort of runs on autopilot.
Yeah.
But it really is a citizen sport at every level. And you know, I learned that from my dad. He was really an amazing person. Talked a lot about the threats of communism and socialism. I'm the youngest in our family of 4, and my brothers are 10 and 11 years older, so I kind of came along later as the baby. But at our family kitchen table, it was always, watch out for socialism. And he was actually the president of the Conservative Party years ago, and would have political meetings in our home. He was definitely an activist, never ran for office. But one of the things that he did that really bugged me, he would give an award called the Weldon Schofstall Award, who was the superintendent of public instruction back in my youth, to the high school library that upheld our Constitution, the books that had the most books that upheld our freedoms and revered our Constitution. And so then he would go through my textbooks and say, why are they having 3 pages on Marilyn Monroe and nothing about the Constitution. You know, he'd say stuff like that. And I didn't come to really appreciate all of that passion for protecting our freedoms until we had children of our own.
Yeah. Yeah, parenting will make a big imprint on you and make you think about things. You grew up in a very political home then.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier, but if he was having those conversations. And I think that's a tricky thing just to say, you know, and I'm sure that the audience has this challenge too. I had a hard time even thinking through whether or not to let my kids watch the debate, presidential debates or other debates. I think partly the topics are maybe beyond them. My kids are 13, 11, and 9. They're fairly young. I think they can understand them, but some of the topics that are discussed are a little bit, there's something I don't think they need to be thinking about necessarily at that age. And then also, but just the tone, getting back to the kindness that we talked about at the beginning, I kind of hesitant to put them in front of that, no matter whether it's the presidential debate or, you know, McSally and Kelly's debate or anybody's debate right now. That tone in politics is hard. How did that strike you as a kid when you were a parent, or when you were a kid with your father doing that? And how do you handle that as a parent?
You know, it's a
when you were
different
involved?
world. I think our kids are inundated by information right now, and we parents probably don't have a lot of choice. We can't insulate them from
They're being flooded with.
They are being
yeah.
flooded, and they really need our voice, our instruction on the truth, and we really need to take advantage of the types of influences that they run up against daily, especially in school, on social media. They're inundated by those ideas anyway. At this point, I mean, when I was a kid, I had to go looking for that. I had a very, I think, sheltered life comparatively to what parents are dealing with right now, and I do not wish. I just think it's awful, the type of challenges that parents are up against right now. And I mean, we really need to be circumspect about making sure that we are watching out for their education, that parents take every opportunity to shelter them the way that they should be, and informed what's in their curriculum, who is making those decisions, and choose wisely these days. There are a lot of resources out there for parents, but they have to go looking for them. They're not going to just come knocking on their door.
Yeah.
And but there are some great organizations out there. Wall Builders is one that puts out a lot of information for parents and on our country's history. But there are a ton of influences I'd like to shelter our grandchildren from, and I know it's hard to talk to them, you know, as a grandparent.
Every
and you want it
grandparent
to be
ever.
a safe space.
Yeah.
But as parents, I think you have a greater opportunity.
Well, I hear again a lot of emphasis on taking the initiative, right? You were talking about getting involved politically, getting involved as a parent, making sure you're taking that initiative, and that's I think a really strong and important message for parents to hear, and especially with all these voices coming at our kids. Okay, I want to talk about the politics. I want to talk about business too. This is the Phoenix Business Forum, after all. I do need a little more parenting help. Maybe we can do that after we're done here. But you know, I think we've got business people sitting in here with us live. We've got business people, whether they're employees, whether they're they've been an employee for a long time, they're thinking about starting a business, maybe they own a business. How should business people at any level think about politics? And I mean, the connection, and you specifically as a politician, maybe how do you think about your role in business. Make sense? I sometimes don't see the connection. You know, I think people think, oh, well, business and politics, are they all working together against me? Are we working, against each other? What's your role, do you think?
Well, it's really hard to separate business and politics. Just about, everything that we do at the Capitol is going to affect somebody. And whether or not you're involved is the factor. You need to be watching what's going on in your government. There's a lot of people that just think, well, I'll just go about my business and it won't affect me. But, there are 3 different areas where I try and consider the business aspect of public policy. First is taxes. I think that's kind of the most obvious thing that people think about when they think about businesses being involved, and there's a lot of different organizations. You've got the chambers, you've got the small business organizations, and their voice is often preeminently, focused upon, and they weigh in a lot on tax policy and that type of thing. But the voice of the small business is incredibly important because, and tax policy is going to affect different levels of business in different ways. And so, when you're considering what's going to be happening in the upcoming elections, when you consider what's happened over the last few years with our prosperity in the United States and in our state in particular after the huge recession in 2008 where we had to cut $3 billion out of an $11 billion budget, and now you see our unemployment before the pandemic was, about 3%. We've just overcome in ways that that make a lot of sense fiscally by not overspending, not taxing businesses at a time when they're recovering from a recession. So looking at tax policy in the future for this election is key. Are we going to, while businesses are down from a self-imposed recession due to the COVID, are we going to elect a party that wants to repeal all the tax cuts and impose new ones in order to increase spending? And then you've got Prop 208 too, that's going to increase taxes to fund supposedly to be a more stable source of revenue for education when we've been able to, because of our tax policies in the state, restore $4.5 billion since 2015 back into education and increase spending and
Let me ask you about 208.
Okay,
I like
sure.
that you brought up 208, and some people may or may not be familiar with it, but let's just summarize. It's going to raise taxes on quote-unquote high-income earners. I think it's over $250,000 maybe. You have to pay an additional tax. I can't remember the exact number. But look it up, educate yourself, don't count on me. And the idea, though, is to raise taxes on high-income earners, which a lot of those people are small business owners.
Yes.
And that's going to fund education in Arizona, right? So you brought up 208. So I'm a business owner. I'm a small business owner. I don't, by those numbers, qualify for the additional tax rate, but I was talking to one of my employees about it because she was asking great questions about, well, I want my kids to have a great education, and I'm an employee, and I'm not going to make that much ever, and so I was trying to have a conversation with her about, well, how does that affect either me as the business owner or our business and the opportunity to employ people? Can you talk a little bit about not just tax policy, but how does it affect the everyday person who's working at a job? Name the employee around here in Phoenix. How does a tax policy like that affect that person, that worker?
Well, number one, when when you have a small business that's already struggling, and like I said, we're struggling right now. We are in an economic recovery because of the self-imposed shutdown. Many small businesses have actually closed and are struggling to reopen. But those that have recovered, that have never shut down to the level that others have, are going to be in the crosshairs. They will. And individuals will have their taxes raised by double, almost double, if they fall into that over $250,000 bracket. The problem is it's not a stable source of revenue. When that's what you need to be looking at as a policymaker, is the stability of the revenue source to fund government. And if it's constantly fluctuating because of things like a recession, then you're constantly looking at what do you have to cut. With 50% of our budget going to education, it's the natural choice because you don't have other choices. And we don't want to be in that position again, ever.
So when there's a dip, then the government looks around and says, oh, we're not getting as much revenue because people aren't making as much, they're not paying as much taxes, then we're going to have to cut.
Right. And, what we've been able to do by not raising taxes after the recession, but actually having some reforms in the state and nationally under President Trump, has been to grow and prosper and to provide higher incomes, especially for the minorities, for women-owned businesses, for everybody, but particularly those that are low income in every racial demographic. We're looking at some pretty dramatic choices here on which direction to go. Are we going to self-impose another tax hike through 208? Are we going to vote to repeal the tax cuts at the federal level by electing a president that wants to repeal most of that and impose more? The mark-to-market, one-time 60% tax hit, that goes on and on.
Yeah. I see the passion coming out. I didn't know it was going to be tax policy. Not that many people get as passionate, as excited as you are right now about tax policy.
Well,
but there it is.
It makes a huge difference, and regulations are the same. But.
So you said tax policy.
Yes.
That's a great example. 208, I think, is something people to educate themselves on, look into. You said there were three things politics and business really overlap, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but first was tax policy. What was number two?
You have to look at the regulations.
And,
okay. Businesses have been strangled, a lot of them, by over-regulation at every level of government. And so, freeing them, reducing them it has been key to.
What would be an example of the type of regulation that might, from your perspective, strangle a business?
Well, bureaucracies are out of control. And so a lot of times, in fact, some of you in this room, one of the things that I most keep busy with is trying to manage and try and keep up with the types of regulations that our agencies are imposing that are outside of our statutory laws. We've had to pass laws giving citizens the opportunity to challenge those policies. Occupational licensing is one.
We actually talked about that with Stephen Slavinsky on our last episode. He's an economist. He studies occupational licensing. The idea that people can't carry their license as a nurse from North Carolina to Arizona is an example of that. They have to get relicensed in each state, and that hinders their opportunity and the business's opportunity. Is that
That's exactly
An
right.
example?
That's a
Okay.
great. That's exactly right. It makes no sense, but there are lobbies that from different types of healthcare, especially um, industries that want to protect themselves. And so, what I look at when I look at a particular bill that has a regulatory bent is whose ox is being gored, who's trying to protect themselves. A lot of times we're trying to fix a problem when a business actually will come, or an individual will come and talk with their legislator and say, this regulation is just, it's keeping me from, having chickens in my yard. But all kinds of different things at the city level, at the state level. And there's some big egg company that is imposing that on the small guy who just wants a few chickens to sell to his farmer's market. And, I'm not going to mention any names, but,
Okay.
legislation is necessary to free small businesses so that they can thrive and actually have a life that makes sense. What you have to watch out for in a lot of industries is the big guys trying to pass laws that really will just be non-competitive for the other guys, for the small guys. We see this in healthcare on steroids, and what's going on now with the vertical integration of insurance companies and healthcare providers, and the middlemen, called the pharmaceutical benefit managers, who are supposed to help control costs of pharmaceuticals. They impose all kinds of restrictions on independent pharmacists that benefit the big guys like the CVS's, but try and put these other guys out of business. And it doesn't benefit the patient at all. It'll just drive them out of business, and there'll be less of them. It's impacting all kinds of patients who are used to going to a pharmacy in their neighborhood, and now they're forced to go somewhere else. That's just one example of how the changing industries require actually a little bit more regulation, because of how they're acting without regulation.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
a complex
it is.
puzzle,
Yeah.
this interaction between politics and business.
It is.
It's very complex. It just makes me think back to your role and thinking, this is a lot for, I think you and Joe owned a business in the past. You had a professional career. You spent a lot of time as a mom. Now you have to become an expert in tax policy, deregulation, and like you said earlier, you're just another citizen who's decided to get involved in that way and educate yourself on all these different moving parts. And you're dealing with pharmaceutical companies now. It's really something to hear. At least you're getting rich, right, as a politician? No, you're not.
That's right.
What's the salary?
$24,000.
$24,000.
But I do get a per
Well,
diem.
yeah. Well, you're,
Yeah, we're lining our pockets, that's for sure.
sorry, I don't mean to be flippant about that, but I mean you're making a lot of sacrifices in order to do that, and all legislators are. And they may have differing opinions on what needs to be done and what doesn't, but I do applaud them at the level of involvement, right? They've decided that it's worth it to be involved, whether it's for $24,000 or some other reason, but they're not just complaining, and you're certainly not doing that either. So what's the third? We've talked about business and politics, taxes, tax policy, deregulation, regulation, and what was the third one?
Well, the third is dragging business, kicking and screaming sometimes, into areas of law that they often like to avoid. And that is some of the family issues, religious liberty, and it's because they don't understand that you can't really separate prosperity and freedom. And so sometimes this is an area where I think the business voice needs to be heard louder. We saw this pretty much big time when Obamacare was passed. And you saw large companies, the mandates to cover all kinds of services, including contraception. You saw the big companies say, that's fine, we already do that. And not speaking up against the mandate for the smaller company or ministry. And so that what we saw were lawsuits by Little Sisters of the Poor, Catholic charities, saying, you know what, this violates our freedom. This violates our religious, the principles that we believe in. Because obviously we hire Catholics who don't believe in abortion or contraception, and we're not going to provide those services, even though none of our nuns need them.
Right.
We saw it with Catholic charities as well in providing foster care. They'd rather go out of business. And who's that going to hurt?
Those are good
go
examples.
Against their deeply held religious liberties.
Right, a government mandate certainly imposes things on them that they may not be comfortable with. Going back to you said dragging businesses kicking and screaming. Just to make sure I understand, you're saying businesses don't want to enter into the fray, so the political discussion, and you want them to get in and speak their mind? Is that what you mean, dragging, kicking, and screaming?
I think what they don't want to be is they don't want to be the top of the headline.
Okay. Yeah, they want to stay under the radar.
They do.
As a business so that it doesn't affect their profit.
Right.
Okay.
They'd rather appease the political correctness of the day rather than stand up for freedom and general principles of freedom that are in our Constitution. And they let the little guy do it. I think you're seeing it now with some of our government mandates due to COVID. You've got people that are fine with the mandates and they're going to survive just fine, and others are having to stand up because they're not just fine. They're not. The mountainside fitnesses are standing up for small businesses. The restaurants, there are lots of examples where you're just seeing the division between large and small. The Save Women's Sports Act, who's standing up for girls. It's easier politically to say, oh no, that's bad. Transgender biological males should go ahead and be able to play on the sports team that they most identify with, even though science doesn't support that position and it harms women. They're making young women stand up for themselves rather than stand up and come alongside policymakers that want to protect them. This is this is an area that is just going to grow and continue to balloon, and churches are going to be in the crosshairs as well. But businesses can lead here. And sometimes they'd rather not take a moral stand. They think that by appeasing the political correctness of the day, like with Black Lives Matter, giving money to an organization that sounds like it's got merit, but when you look a little deeper, you understand the roots of it are full of anarchy and Marxism. Promoting those types of organizations rather than calling them out and giving to real causes that are going to make a real difference in their community. These are the kinds of things that I think business can do better at. And we need their voice. We need their voice.
Yeah. It's kind of refreshing to hear a politician say they want to hear other people's voices. I like that. And you want to hear voices of, like you said, you want to hear voices of moms, and you want to hear voices of business people and doctors and lawyers, and another challenge from Nancy Barto for somebody to get involved here in what you view as a positive way, and businesses are another voice that can do that. So that's well said. So you address the tax policy, deregulation, and then actually speaking up as a business. Those are great ways for businesses to get involved in politics. Nancy, you've talked so much about other voices. I'm kind of interested in hearing you share what are people saying when you're out on the street? Because a lot of people don't realize that as a politician, you spend a lot of time listening, right? You get a lot of phone calls, you go to a lot of events, people want to talk to you and tell you what they think should or shouldn't be done. What do you feel from people right now? And maybe that's even more important than what you're hearing. What do you feel from people in our current environment that you can share with the Phoenix Business Forum audience?
Well, I have no real original ideas myself. All the ideas that I get for fixing problems and legislation always come from the public, from individuals mostly, or groups. What I'm hearing from the public is very troubling. I've mentioned the self-imposed shutdown because of COVID. My office is inundated with emails and phone calls from people that are trying to deal with the cure. What government did here, I think, is going to go down as one of the worst policy decisions in history in its effect, not only locally, nationally, but worldwide. And I'm hearing those voices. When they finally figure out that okay, they're out of work, the government has passed this $2.3 trillion PUA and unemployment insurance to get them through. And then you have a government agency that can't handle the influx of need. It reminds me of Ronald Reagan saying, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. It always falls flat. There's no way government can step in to the degree of the need. And we're seeing that in living color. You don't hear from the large businesses, but you hear from the small guy. You hear from the individuals. They're waiting 2 and 3 weeks to get a call back from our Department of Economic Security. And that's with us intervening as legislators. And I'm not the only one intervening and calling them day by day. Have you gotten back to this person? Have you gotten back to that person? This is serious. People are losing their stuff. They're waiting and waiting and waiting. And you can't blame the agency. They're hiring faster than as fast as they possibly can. They've hired thousands of workers. They're training them, retraining them in order to serve the people. They just cannot keep up. So, and they have to do their due diligence. There's a lot of fraud out there. So, when you're giving out money, they have to make sure it's going to the right person at the right time. I just read today in Colorado about a situation where they're having to claw back money that they've given to the tune of over $10,000 that they've already shelled out. We don't want to be in that position either. So people waiting for the sustenance. I mean, churches are being overwhelmed, I'm sure, with the needs. The second thing I hear is the worry on 2 levels. Their physical safety, because of what they're seeing with the rioting. I can't tell you how many people. I knocked a lot of doors in this campaign because I just came through quite a primary. people are gearing up. They're buying arms. They're expecting rioting. They're afraid. They're afraid, and they really want us to. They want us to know that. They tell you that. Say, I'm going to be ready. Because they don't have confidence in the police being able to protect them. And they're afraid that their guns are going to be confiscated if the wrong party gets in control. The third thing is they're afraid of losing their freedoms. We've been in a position as legislators over the last few months that we could not do anything because of our emergency powers laws here in Arizona. They differ from other states' laws that don't give so much expansive power to an executive, to a governor during a public health emergency, but ours is very expansive. And we haven't been asked to weigh in on anything. So we've been out of session, and we haven't been included in most of the decision making. And there's a lot of distrust about the basis for a lot of the decisions that have been made. And they want us to do something about it. The frustration of not being able to say, I'm going to get right on that, has been palpable.
So it's going to be a rowdy session when you get back.
Well, it's certainly top of the list is making sure that in the future the people's voice is heard, that questions, their concerns are being addressed, before decisions like closures and the basis upon which they're made are
right. And you
decided.
As representatives and senators,
Right.
you're the people's voice, and don't feel like the people are saying they didn't feel like they were heard in this case.
No.
That's what I'm hearing you
Which
say.
is now you're seeing, protests. The mask mandates are being discussed at the city and the county levels. The people are rising up. We could have done it in a more stepwise fashion. We could have been a part of the discussion along the way.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to wrap up. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of worry. What hope do we have? And getting back to my kids, when the great toilet paper crisis of 2020 was going on, I told them it would be hard to live if your sense of security depended on whether toilet paper was available. That's a hard thing to deal with, right? And it was clearly very challenging for a lot of folks. Nobody wants to be without toilet paper, but we're a family of faith. I think our faith in that time really served as a foundation, as it always does, but it's pointed us back to that faith in a new way as the firm foundation that we stand on in Christ, and an opportunity to trust in that during these uncertain times. And sometimes I check myself because I don't want to be Chicken Little about whether or not things are as bad as maybe we think they are. But when I hear you say, no, those are the voices that's what I'm hearing. People are scared. I guess my question is, what's your response? Are you able to give them hope that leaders like yourself and others are going to step in? If not, what do you give them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think our principles of freedom are based in our Constitution. Number one, we need to teach people what those freedoms are. Our security as Christians, as citizens, is never really in government. It's always been deeper than that. It's always been deeper than that. But we do have to recognize and continue to verbalize what are some of the threats to our freedoms and to our security. and identify where those beliefs are coming from. That's why I stand very firmly for education choice, because I think we're seeing the outflow, the results of decades of students learning that America is an evil country, its roots are racist, and not learning a lot of the benefits of capitalism around the world. You know, we've reduced extreme poverty worldwide by 80% since 1981. And you don't hear that. You just, when you see the things going on with ASU's student government, passing resolutions just a couple of weeks ago, calling for defunding the ASU police on campus, and calling for total online teaching, when out of 70,000 tests, there had been 0 deaths across 50 campuses nationwide. 0. 3 hospitalizations, a couple of them were drunk. You know, the hope I give, I think, is based in recognition of the battle between good and evil, and trusting God. You know, one of the things that I've highlighted throughout my campaign, and I continue to highlight in my emails, is prayer. I invite people to prayer meetings to pray for me, pray for the candidates, pray for government, pray for our president, pray for our country, because that's where our power is. This is an eye-opening time for us all to recognize the threat to our traditional institutions that make our country prosperous. Government can't save us, but faith in God and upholding our liberties so that people can live in a civil society are key. And we were built on those principles of freedom. We're at a point now where some judges, I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, God, may she rest in peace, you know, she once called our Constitution something that she would not recommend other countries emulating. Our Constitution is incredibly valuable, and it needs to be revered. Instead, some people want to tear it down and replace it with a living Constitution and allow judges to make the laws. We have clear choices right now before us, and I think the church has a great opportunity to encourage people to pray and to encourage people to look at the issues, to get involved, and look at the differences between the policies makers that are running for office. Pray for them. Pray for a revival in our schools. But pray that we do the right thing and that we have an opportunity to retain and expand liberty and freedom, religious liberty and economic prosperity in our country. And that's only going to come through Christians getting off the sidelines, getting involved, praying and acting and voting.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. We are hosted by Living Streams Church, and although the church doesn't endorse any candidates, I'm certain that it supports prayer, and we're gonna do that here at the end. In just a moment, we're gonna invite the senior pastor from Living Streams up to say a little blessing. Before we do that, though, it's been a privilege. I knew it was going to be a privilege, but it was really nice sitting and talking with you, Nancy. And I don't know if you want to give out your website or people want to go. I think they can just put in your name, Barto, and find you. But if there's anything.
Sure, thank you.
You want to give
I
out?
usually forget to do that.
What's the website?
It's nancybarto.com.
Okay.
I actually have another one called nancysrecord.com. But thank you. I appreciate that, and look forward to any feedback that you might have from that information and any questions.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. It's a busy time for you, and you made it for us. We appreciate it.
Well, you know, I really appreciate being able to talk about what I do. You know, it's kind of rare to be able to get into the weeds like this, and it's a great privilege to do this, to serve, and to, you know, I hope, and I have a lot of people that tell me this, that I'm not your typical politician because I'm not the smooth speaker and all that. But I kind of hold that up as a badge of honor and say, you know, if I can do it, anybody can. And I encourage everybody to get more involved. It's such a blessing to learn about these issues and to meet so many people along the way and to make a difference in government.
Very good. All right, Senior Pastor from Living Streams Church, David Stockton. Come on over. and the live audience goes wild.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we know the God of the Bible is very interested in blessing His children, and I also know He has a sense of humor, putting someone who is shy and kind into such a challenging, potentially corrupt institution, and she's been a watchdog and fighting battles for the church and for the people of God and for the country as a whole. But so thank you for that. But I want to pray a blessing over you who are in business, who are trying to figure out how to navigate 2020, survive and thrive. So let's pray. Father in heaven, I just pray a blessing over all the men and women who are a part of this broadcast, Lord. I ask that you really would help them to know how to navigate the intricacies of policies and elections, as well as business decisions and even just the own safety of their family and the health of those around them. I pray that you would guide them, you'd give them wisdom, you'd give them good rest, you'd give them good sleep. You give them good times with their families. You'd help them to be able to prioritize what is important and what isn't, and to stay focused on those things. I pray that the information that makes it to them, whether it's through news or social media or friends, it would be truth, it would be good, it would be right. I pray that you would also help them be able to know how to filter through all of the information that comes. I pray you would help them to know who to trust as they're making big business decisions and partnerships, and right now, if they're in a time of need in a business, they would know who to trust to give them advice. If they're doing really well in business right now, I pray that they would know who they can trust to help out and to partner with going forward. We do just ask for your grace and your truth to win the day in all of these things. And as we go towards this election, we really ask, Jesus, that you would clean out the corruption in all of the politics, in all of the systems and institutions, and you would continue to raise up watchdogs. You would continue to raise up people who are willing to fight against the powerful and the corrupt, so that the rest of us, so that all of us can live in peace and in freedom. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. God bless you. We'll see you next time.